Look at your face right now. Not a memory of it. Not the version you carry in your mind from every morning in the bathroom. Actually look. Find the nearest reflective surface and turn toward it. A phone screen will do. A window. A darkened monitor. Hold still for 10 seconds and look at the thing looking back at you. Notice that it seems familiar. Notice that you recognize it. Notice that somewhere in your chest there is the quiet certainty that what you are seeing is you. That this flat, bright, reversed image is the face that other people encounter when you walk into a room, when you speak, when you hold someone's attention. The certainty is so complete that you have almost certainly never questioned it. You should question it. What you are looking at in that mirror is not your face. It is light that has bounced off a flat aluminum coating at one specific angle, from one specific distance, under whatever light happens to be in this room, in the single instant you chose to look. It is a physical document produced by a physical instrument. And that instrument has properties, constraints, and systematic distortions that are as real and as measurable as the distortions in a lens ground to the wrong prescription. The instrument has been telling you something. You have been trusting it completely. And the gap between what it tells you and what your face actually is, geometrically, chromatically, dynamically, is wide enough that if you understood the physics of what you were looking at, you would never use the word reflection the same way again. Something has changed in how the question sits. You felt it. Whatever you thought you were looking at a moment ago has become, in the span of one breath, a document whose reliability you have not yet examined. Here is the paradox that sits at the center of this. You have looked at your own face more than at almost anything else in the world, more than the sky, more than the faces of the people you love. Conservative estimates place the average number of mirror checks in a modern life at somewhere between 7 and 15 per day, which means that by the age of 40, you have looked at your face in a mirror somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 times. That is not an approximation designed to impress you. That is a number with a real physical implication. You have the most data, gathered over the longest period, about the single object you are also the worst positioned to perceive accurately. This is not a psychological problem. It is a physics problem. And the physics makes it, in a precise technical sense, insoluble by the instrument you have been using. The mirror gives you a sample. Every time you look into it, you receive exactly one data point. A flat, left-right, reversed, motionless image of your face in the lighting conditions of that room, from the distance at which you happen to be standing, in the expression you wore, in the split second before you adjusted it. One data point. Out of the infinite dimensional space of what your face actually is, its asymmetries, its motion, its depth, its color under different wavelengths, its behavior across time. The mirror samples a single instant and flattens it to 2 dimensions on a silver surface. A scientist conducting this experiment would consider the methodology catastrophically underpowered. You have been making identity conclusions from it for decades. Human intuition was calibrated for medium-sized objects at medium distances behaving in predictable ways. The face is a medium-sized object, so the intuition says, I see it, I recognize it, I know it. But the face is not a simple medium-sized object. It is a 3-dimensional surface with non-uniform curvature, bilateral asymmetry that averages several millimeters, spectral reflectance properties that shift with blood flow, and a temporal dimension, movement, expression, micro-expression, that accounts for the majority of the information others extract from it in real life. The mirror erases most of this. Your intuition does not notice the erasure. The question you cannot yet answer is, what precisely is being erased, and how much does it matter? What the face actually is, in physical terms, is a curved surface made of layered soft tissue with a skeleton underneath, illuminated by light arriving from multiple angles simultaneously, reflecting that light according to the specific geometry of each feature, and moving continuously in response to muscular contractions that are among the smallest and most precisely controlled in the human body. This is not a poetic description. It is a specification. Each part of that specification has a consequence for what the mirror does and does not show you. Start with the geometry. The human face is not flat. The nose projects between 15 and 25 millimeters from the plane of the cheeks. The brow ridge creates a shadow over the orbital area that shifts radically with changes in vertical illumination. The mandible curves away from the viewer at an angle that depends on the exact position of the jaw. When you look in a flat mirror from a fixed distance, the distance your arm or your bathroom counter puts between you and the glass, you are collapsing a three-dimensional structure onto a two-dimensional surface. The projection you receive depends on the viewing angle, and you almost always use the same viewing angle. Straight on, slight upward tilt, light from above. This is not the angle from which other people see you. Other people see you from the side, from below, from the periphery of their vision, from across a table, from 1 meter away, and from 3. The mirror gives you one projection. The world sees you in dozens. Then there is the symmetry problem. The average human face is not bilaterally symmetric. Measurements performed by researchers in facial morphology show that the two halves of the face differ by between 2 and 4 millimeters in the position of corresponding landmarks. The corners of the mouth, the peaks of the brow, the placement of the pupils relative to the midline. These are small numbers in absolute terms. In perceptual terms, they are not small. The visual system of a person looking at your face will detect these asymmetries, process them, and incorporate them into their perception of you. Below the level of conscious attention, the mirror shows you your face laterally reversed. Your left side appears on the right, and your right on the left. Because your face is asymmetric, the reversed image is, in a technically precise sense, a different face. It is not a radically different face, but it is measurably different. And you have been using it as the primary reference against which you evaluate every photograph, every video, every other person's description of how you look. The razor sentence for what the mirror actually is. A flat mirror is an instrument that generates a single two-dimensional projection of a three-dimensional object at a fixed angle, left-right reversed, at a distance of your own choosing, in whatever light happens to exist, and then offers that projection as though it were the object. Most people believe the face they see in the mirror is the face other people see. What science shows is that no one sees the face the mirror shows, not even the person in front of it, because the brain corrects the image in real time, filling in the motion and depth the flat surface cannot provide. The face you know is an artifact of an instrument. Now, consider the light. The face's perceived color, the warmth or coolness of the skin, the darkness under the eyes, the color of the lips, is not a fixed property of the tissue. It is a relational property. It depends on the spectral distribution of the light falling on it and the spectral sensitivity of the eye observing it. Bathroom lighting, which is where most human beings conduct most of their mirror checking, tends toward the blue-white end of the spectrum. Natural daylight is broader in spectral range. Incandescent and warm light shifts the perceived skin tone significantly toward the amber and red. The face you see in the bathroom mirror is not the face others see under the fluorescent light of an office, or in afternoon sunlight, or in the warm light of a restaurant. Your reference image, the one you use to judge photographs and videos, was built primarily under one lighting condition. You have been calling that condition your face. If the mirror is a specific kind of instrument with specific limitations, the question becomes, what does the brain do with the distorted sample it provides? The answer is, as usual, more interesting and more alarming than the question suggests. What happens in the first moments of mirror contact is a cascade that begins in the primary visual cortex, V1, and propagates outward through the ventral visual stream in approximately 170 milliseconds. The signal reaches the fusiform face area, a region in the right temporal lobe that responds selectively and powerfully to faces within a quarter of a second. At this point, something important happens. The brain does not simply record what it sees. It compares it to a stored model. The stored model is a three-dimensional neural representation of the face's shape, its characteristic asymmetries, its most common expressions, built from thousands of previous observations. When the visual input matches the stored model sufficiently, the brain produces the subjective experience of recognition. That is me. Here is where the distortion becomes structural. Gillian Rhodes at the University of Western Australia demonstrated in work spanning from the late 1990s through the mid-2000s that the face processing system is exquisitely sensitive to spatial frequency information. The low-frequency information that carries overall shape and proportions, and the high-frequency information that carries fine details like skin texture and line sharpness. The face you see in the mirror is typically processed under conditions: distance, illumination angle, emotional state of the observer, that favor certain spatial frequency bands over others. The stored model in your brain was built from those conditions. When you see yourself in a photograph taken at a different distance, with different lighting, from a different angle, the high-frequency and low-frequency information arrives in proportions the stored model was not built from. The face looks wrong, not because it is a worse image, because it is a more accurate one. Ralph Adolphs at Caltech, working on the neural architecture of face perception across 2 decades of research, documented the degree to which face recognition is a constructive, not merely receptive, process. The brain does not passively absorb the image. It actively assigns identity by matching incoming sensory data to a stored template, and it weights the incoming data according to the reliability it has assigned to the source. The mirror, seen thousands of times, is assigned high reliability. The photograph, seen rarely and often under surprising conditions, is assigned lower reliability. When they conflict, when the photograph shows something the mirror does not, the brain experiences this as the photograph being wrong, not the mirror. This is not irrationality. This is Bayesian inference operating correctly on the data that is available. The problem is that the data was systematically biased from the beginning. The layer of this that most people do not expect is temporal. The face in the mirror is motionless, or nearly so. You adjust your expression, you tilt your chin, you hold the position that feels most natural. You almost never see yourself in the sustained, spontaneous motion that constitutes your face as other people actually experience it. Anjan Chatterjee at the University of Pennsylvania, whose work on neuroaesthetics has mapped the perceptual responses to facial features across populations, has noted that the dynamic properties of the face, the way it moves, the micro-expressions that last less than 1/5 of a second, the asymmetries that appear only in motion, are among the most important contributors to how others perceive attractiveness, personality, and emotional state. These properties are invisible in the mirror. The face you know is a still image. The face others know moves, and a moving face is, in a fundamental physical sense, a different object than a still one. Not merely a still face with motion added, but a face whose most distinctive features only exist in the transition between states. Compare this, for a moment, to the history of portrait photography. For the first century of the medium, from the 1840s through the 1940s, exposure times were long enough that subjects had to hold perfectly still. The result was a particular aesthetic, serious, composed, motionless, that had nothing to do with how people actually looked in life and everything to do with the constraints of the instrument. We now recognize those portraits as documents of the technology as much as documents of the people. The mirror is not technologically different. It is an instrument with constraints. The face it shows is a document of those constraints. What the industry of photography charges tens of thousands of dollars in lighting equipment, lens correction, and post-processing to overcome the distortions of angle, distance, focal length, and chromatic aberration. Your mirror introduces silently, without charge, and without disclosure, every morning before you leave the house. If you subscribe to this channel and leave a like, you will receive, in every subsequent episode of this series, the same thing you are receiving right now, a mechanism explained at the level at which it actually operates. Not simplified into comfort, but made precise enough to change how you move through the next hour. That is the only reason this series exists. What does the chronic reliance on the mirror over a lifetime actually produce? The answer is not a psychological problem. It is an epistemic one, and the epistemic problem has consequences that are measurable in physical terms. The stored neural model of your face was built primarily from one source, the flat, reversed, single-angle image provided by the mirror, under the lighting conditions of whatever bathroom you used between the ages of roughly 3 and today. This is your reference frame for self-perception. Every other image of yourself, every photograph, every video, every description offered by another person, gets evaluated against this reference. When the other image diverges from the reference, the divergence is experienced as error. The photograph is unflattering. The video is strange. The friend's description is a compliment you cannot quite accept because it describes a face that does not match your model. Here is the reformulation. What you call insecurity about your appearance is, in a mechanistically precise sense, the readout of a measuring instrument that was never calibrated against the thing it was measuring. You are not seeing yourself too harshly or too generously. You are seeing yourself through an instrument whose systematic errors you have never been given the tools to identify, and which, over decades, has become the standard against which everything else is judged. The physical scale of this drift matters. Think of it this way. A geodetic survey instrument that accumulates 2 millimeters of error per kilometer produces no detectable problem over a few hundred meters. Over 100 kilometers, it has placed a river in the wrong watershed. The mirror introduces errors at the level of millimeters, the lateral reversal, the depth collapse, the lighting artifact, which are negligible over any single observation and accumulate over 40 years of daily checking into a reference model that is displaced from reality in ways that are no longer small. The face in your mental model may be literally, physically, measurably different from the face that others perceive. Not by much in absolute terms, but by exactly enough to make every external image of yourself feel, stubbornly and persistently, like a document from somewhere slightly wrong. The symptoms of this drift are ones you have felt. The surprise at photographs that do not match what you expected. The sense that the video version of you moves wrong, sounds wrong, looks wrong. The inability to fully accept a compliment about your appearance because the face being complimented is not the face in the model. You may have attributed these to self-criticism, or to camera distortion, or to the simple fact that seeing yourself is strange. These are real contributions, but underneath all of them is a physical cause. The reference instrument was biased, and the model was built from the bias, without regular exposure to dynamic, uncontrolled images of your own face. Videos in natural light, photographs at unexpected angles, the reaction of people who are not looking at you for the first time. The mirror model calcifies. It becomes less a model and more an identity document, and identity documents do not update easily. The entropy here is not metaphorical. The neural model of your face requires input to remain calibrated. Sensory data from multiple angles, distances, lighting conditions, and temporal contexts. Without that varied input, the model becomes more rigid, not less. It becomes more attached to the mirror version and less able to integrate contrary evidence. The face in your head gets further from the face in the world, not because you have changed, but because the model stopped receiving the kind of data that would correct it. Tell me in the comments, when you see yourself in a video or a photograph you did not pose for, the kind taken without warning, which part of your face surprises you most? The overall shape, the asymmetry, the way you move, the expression at rest. I want to know what the instrument has been hiding for you, specifically. What the mirror does not show is where this story turns interesting, because what the mirror cannot show has nothing to do with the flat glass and everything to do with why the face is structured the way it is. The human face is the product of approximately 500 million years of evolution as the primary social signaling surface of a lineage that became, eventually, an intensely cooperative species. In that time, it developed a musculature of extraordinary complexity. 43 individual muscles, each capable of independent contraction, producing over 10,000 distinguishable expressions, the vast majority of which occur faster than conscious attention can track. The face is not primarily a surface for looking at. It is a transmission system. It evolved not to be seen, at least not in the sense of being photographed or reflected, but to emit a continuous stream of high-resolution social data in real time, in motion, at the specific distances and angles at which human beings interact with one another. The mirror intercepts this transmission system and reduces it to a still image. This is roughly analogous to trying to understand the function of a musical instrument by photographing it. The photograph shows you the shape and the surface. It does not show you the vibration, the resonance, the relationship between the components in the act of producing sound. The face in motion is not the face at rest plus motion. The motion is the face. The micro-expressions that communicate genuine emotion, whose authenticity others can detect in as little as 1/20th of a second, are not features you have observed in your own mirror. They occur below the threshold of deliberate expression and vanish before the mirror can record them. The face others trust or distrust, find warm or cold, recognizable or opaque. That face is made of those movements, and that face has never once appeared in your mirror. The gradient here is real and physical. Information flows from the transmitting face to the receiving visual system along a channel shaped by the evolution of both. The receiving visual system, someone else's brain looking at you, is designed to read the full bandwidth signal. The mirror is a narrowband tap on that channel. It captures a subset of the signal and presents it as the whole. The mismatch between the mirror image and the real face is not a flaw in the mirror. It is an accurate measurement of the bandwidth difference between one channel and the other. This matters evolutionarily in a specific way. For the 4.5 billion seconds of evolutionary time during which the hominid lineage was developing its face-processing machinery, from Australopithecus to Homo sapiens, across roughly 4 million years, no individual in that lineage ever saw their own face. Not once. There were no mirrors. There were no still pools of water calm enough to provide a usable reflection in the moments that mattered. The face processing system was built entirely and exclusively to process other faces, to read their signals, to respond to their emotions, to make social decisions based on the information streaming from the faces of allies and adversaries and mates. The brain was never given the problem of processing its own face. It was given the problem of processing yours. The mirror arrived approximately 8,000 years ago in the form of polished obsidian and copper. Silvered glass mirrors accessible to ordinary people became common in Europe in the 14th century, roughly 700 years ago. The kind of bathroom mirror you used this morning, flat and accurate enough to see fine detail, became a domestic fixture in the 19th century. Against 4 million years of face processing evolution, the mirror is not an adaptation. It is a novelty. The brain's attempt to use it for self-knowledge is an improvisation, a system built for one purpose, pressed into service for another, producing output that is treated as accurate because there is no other instrument available. Subscribe and leave a like if this channel is giving you the physics of your own existence at the resolution where it actually operates. Not a metaphor for the body, but the body as it is. Now that you understand what the mirror cannot do, it is worth understanding what you can do instead, not as wellness advice, but as applied physics. The goal is to give the brain's face processing model a broader and more accurate input set, not to fix it psychologically, to recalibrate it physically. The first and most direct intervention is video. Not a selfie video taken deliberately and examined carefully. A video of yourself talking naturally, on a call, in a recorded conversation, reviewed without preparation. The specific configuration that matters. Natural ambient light, not overhead, with some lateral component. Distance of 1 to 2 meters. The camera at roughly eye level, not below it. These are not arbitrary aesthetic preferences. They correspond to the actual viewing conditions in which other human beings perceive your face most of the time. across a table, in conversation, in the light that comes from windows rather than ceiling fixtures. The brain needs this data. It does not need it to look better. It needs it because the model built from the mirror is geometrically and dynamically impoverished, and the model drives every judgment you make about images of yourself. The physical reason this works comes directly from the mechanism established in Block 4. The fusiform face area and its associated processing networks update their reference model based on cumulative sensory input. The more inputs from varied angles, distances, and lighting conditions, the more accurate the stored model becomes. Not in the sense of becoming more flattering, but in the sense of becoming more representative of the actual three-dimensional structure. This is not a psychological recalibration. It is a neural one. New sensory data revises a probabilistic model. The model becomes less rigid. The contrast between the mirror image and external images becomes less alarming. Not because you have learned to love the photograph, but because the reference against which you are comparing it has become more accurate. For the asymmetry specifically, there is a practice that produces an immediate physical consequence. Look at photographs of yourself in which the lighting is strongly lateral, coming from one side. Lateral lighting reveals the three-dimensional structure of the face by casting shadows across its relief. The nose, the orbital bones, the jaw, these structures become visible as three-dimensional objects rather than as flat surfaces. The brain's processing of this input will, over repeated exposures, update the stored model's representation of your face's depth. You will begin to see, in the mirror, a face that has depth and relief, rather than a face that looks flat and familiar. This is not a visualization exercise. It is the normal process of sensory model refinement, applied deliberately to a domain where most people have never applied it. One error to avoid: evaluating all photographs as though the goal were to match the mirror image. This nullifies the recalibration. The mirror image is the biased reference. Photographs taken from varied angles under varied light are more accurate data. The brain will initially experience the more accurate data as wrong. This is the instrument's bias asserting itself. The signal that the recalibration is working is when a photograph at an unexpected angle stops being surprising and starts being recognizable. That is the model catching up to the face. For those for whom deliberate video review is uncomfortable, and there are specific neurological reasons related to the emotional loading of self-directed attention, why it is genuinely uncomfortable for some people, there is a lower bandwidth alternative. Other people's descriptions of your face, received with the explicit frame that they are data from an instrument with a wider field of view than the mirror. Not to fish for compliments, to collect angular data. Other people see you from behind, from the side, in motion, in expression, in the moments you do not observe yourself. Their reports are a measurement of your face from a different position in space. They are not more correct than the mirror in all ways. They are more correct in the ways the mirror is specifically wrong, which is to say, in the dynamic, three-dimensional, multi-angle reality of what your face is. The minimum effective dose for meaningful model revision, based on what we know about the timescales of neural model updating, is on the order of weeks of repeated varied input, not a single session. The mechanism does not produce instant recalibration. It produces gradual revision, the way a map is revised when new survey data comes in, not by erasing the old version, but by incorporating new measurements that shift the contours incrementally toward accuracy. The mirror is the most personal instrument in human material culture. No other object has been used by more people, across more cultures, across a longer continuous history, for the specific purpose of self-knowledge. In ancient Egypt, polished copper discs were buried with the dead so that the soul would have access to its own image in the afterlife. In medieval Europe, the mirror was a symbol of vanity, not because looking at yourself was considered morally wrong, but because vanity meant seeing yourself as you wish to be, rather than as you were. The mirror was already understood, at a cultural level, to be an instrument that did not tell the truth, even before anyone knew what the truth was physically. What the physics adds to that old intuition is specificity. The mirror does not lie by producing a false image. It lies by producing an incomplete one, and then offering that incompleteness with such perfect flatness, such clean silver reflection, such untroubled surface, that the incompleteness is invisible. The flat mirror is not designed to deceive. It is not designed at all, in the sense of having been built with intent. It reflects according to the angle of incidence, without preference, without selection. The distortion is a property of geometry, not of intention. It shows you what is in front of it, at the angle at which it is presented, in the light that is available. This is all any instrument can do. But here is what this means for you, specifically in physical terms. The face you have been carrying in your mind as the reference for your own appearance is a sample drawn from a biased instrument, built over decades of daily observation, weighted heavily toward conditions that correspond to no moment in the actual experience of the people who know you. The face in your head is not wrong. It is a model. And all models are simplifications of the territory, built from the instruments used to survey it. You have one instrument. It has specific properties. They have been operating, without your knowledge, on the most intimate object in your world. There is something in this that goes beyond the optics and the neuroscience. The problem of self-knowledge, the ancient, intractable problem of whether any organism can see itself as it actually is, turns out to have a physical substrate. The body is positioned inside the world it tries to perceive. The eyes point outward. The face is on the outside of the skull, in the part of space the organism cannot directly observe. To see the face, the organism needs a second surface, a reflective one, a recording one, and every second surface introduces the physics of its own mediation. The mirror mediates by reversing, flattening, and fixing. The photograph mediates by freezing and compressing. The memory of someone else's description mediates by filtering through their perception and their language. There is no unmediated view of your own face. There is only the choice of which instrument to use, and the clarity to know what that instrument can and cannot show. The mirror has been in service for 8,000 years, and in that entire time, no one has handed you its manual.